Next up, the final part of our reading today, we're going to be discussing from the divine forces of the lunar nakshatras, as portrayed in the Vedas. We are going to be discussing the native. And you can, check out the video that I've got here on Mrigashirsha Nakshatra in the Vedas to give a little bit more backdrop on Soma as a deity of Mrigashirsha. Now we're talking about the native. We're talking about how does the qualities that we've learned about Soma as a deity play in the character of somebody who has the moon in Mrigashirsha Nakshatra or who has any important emphasis of planets in Mrigashirsha. We read that Jyotisha Shastra classifies Mrigashirsha as a divine, a deva nakshatra, of a soft or tender mridu quality. In the stellar space of Mrigashirsha, Prajalpati, which is the deity of Brahma, who rules Rohini, which is the nakshatra that came just before Mrigashirsha. In the stellar space of Mrigashirsha, Prajalpati Brahma transforms into a stag and pursues his own daughter. Pierced by Rudra's arrow, Prajalpati's head flies up and lands in that space of the sky, occupied by the stars of Mrigashirsha. Hence, the stellar configuration of this nakshatra is in the form of a deer's head. So it's Prajalpati's head. Interesting. This is also suggested by its name. Mrigashirsha means the head of a deer or antelope. Importantly, it is the head of a male deer. Got it. It's a stag. Okay. So it's Prajalpati's head that is there. So thus many facets of the native are gleaned from the nature and behavior of stags and secondarily deer. So there is a passion, there is a sort of, not aggression, although I'm going to see what we're going to read here, but there is a one-pointedness towards experiencing that which is inside the self as the moon, as the jivatman. And the meek, gentle quality of the deer is considered secondary to this author, which is interesting. So let's read about what is said here. A mature stag is recognized by its full-grown set of antlers, a process that begins slowly and requires repeated shedding until their final shape is cast. In similar fashion, time is required for the native of Mrigashirsha to reach full maturity, and the process will no doubt involve a series of trials and tribulations. Once fully matured, the native is at last viewed by others as a leader of the herd, of their own herd. And of course, becoming a leader means you must go through the transfusions, the diffusions of being in the herd that you identify with internally. Indeed, Soma Raj is a handful of nakshatra devatas. King Soma, Soma Raj, the deity of Mrigashirsha, is among a handful of nakshatra devatas deserving of the title of king. Other devatas include Indra, Varuna, and Yama in particular. But we read of Soma Raj that he is the king of Brahmins. That comes from the Shatapatha Brahmana. And he's also known as the king of the plant kingdom in Mandala 10 of the Rig Veda. Now, central to the elaborate Soma Yagna ceremony, which is a key sacrificial rite, all the yagnas, the Vedic yagnas, are considered to be the divine Vedic rite that symbolizes everything going on in the nakshatras. Even the way that the Vedic ceremony is laid out, it's a ceremony that takes a year to prepare, and there's deep intentions laid out in a sacrificial, devotional way throughout the year leading up to this ceremony. The Vedic yajna is the key to understanding what the nakshatras are. And the Soma yajna particularly relates to what Soma is in the Vedic mind. And so that's why when we read about the ceremony, we get a glimpse of what Soma is and what it represents to the Vedic mind. So central to the elaborate Soma yajna ceremony is the symbolic rebirth, the initiation of the yajamana into manhood, and that is the person going through the Vedic ceremony, the Vedic sacrifice ceremony. They're experiencing a death and rebirth, an initiation in this ceremony. Hence the transition of Mrigashirsha natives, the person with the moon in Mrigashirsha, their transition into adulthood is typically the grand finale of a particular accomplishment, feat, or event. So that is almost like some great accomplishment for Mrigashirsha natives. They will make some big accomplishment in their lives, and this will signify for them a feeling of coming into the initiation, into rebirth, into life, into manhood or womanhood in a true sense. These transitional stages would be important for Mrigashirsha natives. Now, Soma is the portal through which priests and men transcend everyday reality. Soma is very important, as we've just read in our series talking about Soma as a deity. Not surprisingly, this native of Mrigashirsha displays a great fascination for altered states of consciousness, and will often leverage external substances to induce such states. It's interesting to see how somebody might have positive planets here and experience perhaps some strength in the world of psychedelics or altered states of any sort, not necessarily just through the imbibing of substances, such as meditation, psychedelic forms of yoga and pranayama, etc., even tantra. In charts suggesting a natural proclivity towards spirituality, an exploration of alternative realities opens the door to higher truths of self-realization. However, if Mrigashirsha Nakshatra is gravely afflicted, such practices can become little more than a means of self-medication and possibly even self-distraction and self-destruction. Now, I just want to read this for a moment. Now, in charts suggesting more worldly involvement, there is an unquenchable thirst for pursuing the many pleasures of life. Recall that prinana, which means making the world more enjoyable or pleasing, is the Shakti of Mrigashirsha. So the Shakti of Mrigashirsha is all about making the world more tolerable, making us able to experience it in a more tolerable way, to bring joy from what is inside of the self. And the experience of joy, the experience of the bliss of what one is, of Ananda, is depicted as being central to what Soma is, which is very deep, something super psychedelic going on there. But in particular for Mrigashirsha natives, the concept of self-enjoyment, of enjoying life, becomes, enjoying life through being what you inherently are and enjoying what you inherently are, is a big important theme that can either launch them towards success or drag them down towards failure. Now, unfortunately, this author sometimes describes the character of these nakshatras through the ancient idea that the nakshatra in the sign has a shared resonance, as a shared symbology. They are talking now in this part about what happens when planets are in Taurus versus planets when are in Gemini. In today's day and age, Mrigashirsha does not fall into Taurus, so that's why I'm going to ignore those bits. Now, ultimately, pleasure-seeking and sensory indulgences are compelling forces in the life of Mrigashirsha natives. We recall that Prajapati pursues his own daughter, Usas, and Soma gets hot and bothered over Tara, the wife of another god, and it causes disruption in the divine pantheon. Soma can't help but get super hot and bothered about somebody named Tara, who is the wife of Brihaspati, who's a sage. And Brihaspati, just is sage-like and is kind of unaffected by it internally. But the sage knows that it's technically wrong. And so that's why all the gods scramble at that moment to figure out how we got to deal with the fact that Soma just stole an important sage's wife. Because Soma gets lost to the musk of its own enjoyment. In these legends, desire supersedes principles of right and wrong. Thus, the Mrigashirsha native can assertively seek after what they desire, despite known repercussions. It's gently listening to the taboo desires and enjoyments that are born inside the heart and soul. We want to do it fearlessly, but we still have to have our spiritual wits about us. We still want to abide by Ganesha, Ganapatye, which is a combination of intuition, our intellect, which I believe would be Ga, with Na, which is wisdom. It might be the other way, actually. That would make sense. I believe that Ga is wisdom, a universal wisdom, and then Na, like Narada, is a self-realized wisdom of how wisdom applies to us, including all these dark parts of the mind that involve our desires. When we abide by Ganesha, we can oversee the little mouse of the mind through the Ga of wisdom, Ganeshwara, right? So this is why it's important for someone with Mrigashirsha to explore what's inside them, to explore their desires openly, without fear, but also abide by universal wisdom. Now, prevalent themes in the life of this native may include seduction, abduction, and even stalking, especially if it kind of goes bad. And this sort of, again, there is a lot of the times the nakshatras can abide by a sense of the nakshatras are morally ambiguous in the sense that the nature of nature is conveyed through the nakshatras in a very strong way. Mrigashirsha, having been abducted by its own father, and this incestuous element of that story, goes to show at some level that there is the capacity for a Mrigashirsha native to experience a desire to explore taboos, and especially sexual taboos related to kink, and to the sexual phases of submissive versus dominant, and all the sort of kinky playouts that can happen between an alpha and a beta, a pusher and a receiver, and the vice versa of those things. In my opinion, such things can be done safely, communicated effectively, if we don't take them as a taboo that is unable to be explored with mindful purpose. We should be open to whatever is inside of our hearts and explore them with meditative mind, so that not only do we not get attached to them, but they don't become an unconscious shadow where we chew the cud of wondering about those unexplored desires in our deepest moments of meditation, and it fogs us because we have not allowed ourselves to explore it. That being said, it's important for this type of person to meditate on the nature of the eternal self, which is beyond these phases of the mind. The sun, the Atman, which is beyond this astral karma of a person who wants to explore these kinks and other such things. Just because you're beyond it, Shiva is beyond it, doesn't mean you can't explore it. But just because you explore it doesn't mean you need to identify with it at the deepest sense. It's objectivity is what's going on here. I digress. Look to the tenure of the chart and the nature of the Mrigashirsha's planet. So whatever planet or whatever's going on in Mrigashirsha, to determine if the native's deep-seated urges are within the realm of decency and aligned with universal principles. If influenced by multiple malefics, the native may spend a lifetime trapped in a vicious cycle of never-ending cravings that would be difficult to get out of. Now, this would probably happen especially if you have either a planet there or a difficultly placed planet in the chart. If the sign is not well, if you've got a hard planet there, especially Mars, Saturn, or the Sun, the malefic Moon, malefic Mercury, and if those planets are not well supported generally in the chart, this is when these kinds of afflictions can happen. It's like you never get enough of the craving represented by Mrigashirsha. You never feel fully like you are enjoying the bliss, the ananda that is talked about in the Vedas and etc. Until you start to meditate. That'll be my final word in my own train of thought there. Now, Buddha, Mercury, is born from Soma's affair with Tara, and is later adopted by Brihaspati, who is Tara's original husband. Hence, on the familial side, out of wedlock pregnancies and or adoption may be in order for those with afflictions to Mrigashirsha Nakshatra. As for social habits, I should say, my friend Reshma, I'm glad to be having you here. You have Venus in Mrigashirsha Nakshatra. Very interesting. And I hope that this story has been giving you some elucidation on what Mrigashirsha is all about. Now, as for social habits, a stag is known for its preference of traveling alone. Hence the proverb going stag, meaning without a partner at a social gathering, a stag party. Alternatively, the stag may elect to travel in a small band of fellow stags during the non-mating season. In either case, time away from the hustle and bustle of crowds is a must-have for the Mrigashirsha native. Often, just a handful of deep, close friends is all that the Mrigashirsha native requires for companionship. Now, Soma's dearest companion is Indra, who is dependent on the Soma draft for strength and courage. Without beloved Soma, Indra is but an ordinary god. Somewhere in the life of the native there is an Indra, one who is likely dependent upon the Mrigashirsha native and probably derives great courage and fortitude from him. To determine who that person might be, look to the house placement or rulership of the planet that is in Mrigashirsha. For example, if the 10th Bhavabhavesha, the 10th Lord, is in Mrigashirsha, like let's say if you're a Cancer rising, Aries is the 10th house of Cancer, the 10th Bhavesha. So if Mars falls into Mrigashirsha, then that's the 10th Lord falling into Mrigashirsha. In such a case, it might be possible that the Indra in your life might be a boss or a superior at work. If the 3rd house lord falls into Mrigashirsha, it's more likely a sibling. If the 5th lord falls into Mrigashirsha, look for a child or a student to fill this role of an Indra who depends on you, or on whom you depend in certain ways to be given courage and fortitude in a mutual way. Very interesting. Now, it's worth noting that Soma, along with Agni, is the foremost god of the Vedic ritual, of the Vedic sacrificial yajnas. So thus the native may display an interest in spiritual or societal rites and rituals. Now, finally, a discussion of the native's life would be lacking without an inquiry into the impact of Soma's brutal and theatrical death. This is part of what we've read in the video that I've done where I talk about Soma here, the Soma deity of Mrigashirsha. What was described is that during the ceremony, the Soma Yagna ceremony, the Soma stalk, the plant that holds Soma inside it, is beaten and chopped up and squeezed in order to get the juice out. In the same way, what appears as ordinary green stalks on the outside of the Soma plant are ruthlessly beaten with stones in order to extract the rare and precious red Soma juice. Without a doubt, Soma is the sole sacrificial substance worth more than its weight in gold. So similarly, residing within the depths of the Mrigashirsha native is a rare and valuable gem, a priceless ruby waiting to be unearthed. Perhaps that ruby is an unusual talent or rare knowledge. Perhaps it is their life's calling that is deep somewhere inside them. Extraction of this ruby is no simple feat. Repeated thrashings from a teacher, a mentor, or a guru, or some kind of repetitive life lesson leads to the discovery of this gemstone inside the soul of whatever it is. Only then, when beholding such marvel, is the ceaseless need for pleasure at last satiated. It is at that moment that the true ecstasy and life-intoxicating Soma is experienced. Whatever is the true meaning and purpose inside the self has to go through some kind of tapas, some kind of fire of Agni, some kind of sort of initiation, some kind of sacrifice ceremony. Something must be sacrificed in you in order to finally be freed from the sensate desires of meaningless sensual cravings and to be put into a purposefulness that aligns with the self, that gives joy for what the nature of the joy inside the self inherently has been throughout the whole life of the person. And that is when Soma is experienced at its best. It's a metaphor for everybody. It's particularly a poignant metaphor for the Mrigashirsha native.